usually you start like literally, uh, you know, on the minute here. We have 21 participants and people will trickle in. So, good evening, good morning, everyone. We're delighted to have Mike Gadsby, who is a co founder of an organization called O3 World and a dear friend. And Mike Gadsby is one of the thought leaders in the adoption of AI in enterprises. And he is going to share with us a lot about what is getting adopted in the world of AI and what should we be doing consequently to keep ourselves updated and aware. So, without further ado, over to you, Gatsby. You got to unmute yourself, my friend.
Yeah, that'll help, right? For all the technology in the world, the one thing I will say, if you don't push the button, it's not going to work, right? Definitely a good place to start. Well, thank you, everyone, for having me. I really appreciate it. I'm really excited to hop into this. This is a lot of fun putting this together. On the whole, it forced me to sort of even like think about some of the core skill sets that even I've developed in the last few years. So hopefully that everyone will get a pretty good deep dive on how this works and kind of how it'll impact your career, both in the short term, near term, and then even in the long term as well. So let me share my screen. Um, I also want to call out, and she's going to hate that I do this, that my mom is on this, which it just warms my heart so much that we get to share a professional experience from time to time. So thanks for joining, Mom.
Oh,
Um,
wow, that's fantastic. A very, very warm welcome, Mrs. Gatsby.
Excellent. Okay, so I'm going to hop into this. Everyone can see my screen? Yes? Great. Okay, so first and foremost, just some background on us. I mean, Sushma did a wonderful job of sort of setting this up, but I want to make sure that just give everyone a little more context. So, I am Mike Gadsby. I'm co-founder, chief innovation officer at O3. O3, we are digital experience consultants located in Philadelphia, although truthfully, we have folks kind of all over the world, but are headquartered in Philadelphia. So the work we do is really built around helping organizations figure out how to use the digital channel in a much more effective way in order to really improve experiences, right? Whether those are internal employee experiences or external customer experiences, it doesn't really matter. At the end of the day, what digital has set up for us is, and it has been this way for many years now, has given us the ability to really remove friction from those experiences and really enhance them on the whole. In the last couple of years, AI has really allowed us to elevate that in such a more meaningful way. So as we have evolved as an organization, AI has become front and center to the work we're doing and a lot of the consulting that we're providing these days. Just a sense of sort of the organizations we work with. We do work in a lot of different industries. We see a lot of different sort of needs, use cases, the things that I think fundamentally are sort of connect the dots. And hopefully I'll go through a few of those today that are going to be kind of relevant for everybody. But as you can see, I mean, what I think we see is sort of a connecting fiber across all of these industries is the fact that sort of experience is central to all of this. And at the end of the day, really making people's lives better is really what we're trying to do, whether that's in healthcare, whether that's in financial technology, insurance, even CPG. Okay. So I'm going to go through a quick agenda here. So first and foremost, I'm going to just kind of set the stage a little bit. We'll talk about AI and kind of the future of skill development, what we're kind of seeing, and some of the key things to consider. Then I'm going to give everyone a framework. So it's one thing to say, yeah, we all need to learn AI. It's another thing to think about, okay, well, where do I begin? I think there's certainly, and I know I feel this way, a bit of an overwhelming feeling, especially with the number of AI products that hit the market that like, oh God, I got to know everything. And the fact of the matter is you don't. You need to know what's relevant to you. And I'll give you the same sort of framework that we use for clients and organizations you can use personally to really kind of figure that out. And then finally, we'll explore some sort of key skills around AI. I'll give you guys some hacks I use on a regular basis to hopefully streamline a few things in your day. All right, so let's set the stage here. So I'm going to provide a very brief history of AI. And now this might be some of you might know this very well, some of you might not, but I think it's good to just sort of set the context and kind of how we got here. So AI has been around for a while. Truth be told, I mean, if you look in the 30s, 40s, and 50s, we were using early computers to do essentially logic and rules to essentially produce outcomes, right? So it's an if this then that sort of scenarios have been around a long time. It's really what was the sort of intro to computing as we know it, right? But that was early versions of AI, right? It was early reasoning. It was early, you're gonna give me three responses. I'm gonna give you some sort of rules to make those decisions. And then there you go. That's the computers themselves were sort of making the decisions. As things progressed, we started to getting into things like deep learning and machine learning on the whole. I think the major progress here was really in what we've seen in sort of vision and speech over the last, say, 10 to 20 years. When Alexa came out, it was really neat. And it was cool. But like reality was it, you all know this kind of works some of the time, right? Like it was kind of neat in certain areas, but for the most part, like, there were things that did work and things that didn't work. I think about like early chatbots and chatbot solutions, right? When we were all like, trying to hit up your whoever your cell phone provider is because you had an issue, and you'd get on there and you'd start chatting for like 5 minutes, and then what ended up happening is it got nowhere, and then it ended up elevating you to like a customer service rep anyways, and it was kind of a little bit of a waste of time. I'm sort of broadly generalizing there, of course, but what we were seeing there are just sort of the early foundations for where we're at now, and especially with machine learning. Machine learning is core to the most advanced technologies that we're dealing with now, which is really generative AI. And generative AI is interesting, especially as ChatGPT hit the market a few years ago. And now you're starting seeing, all of these folks like Anthropic kind of growing up around them. It's allowed us to create, right? So we kind of started with structure, we started with learning, and sort of evolved into learning, and now we can create things. And this is really why AI has really hit in such a big way, is because it's not just about having it solve tasks. It's about having it answer questions. It's about having it execute tasks, right? I'm not going to get into this too much today, but a newer sort of phenomenon now is the concept of AI agents. So that the idea is I'm going to go ask a question and then it's going to go take an action for me. Right, that's a really interesting place to be, and this is really where it's going to be impacting workforce development on the whole in a very significant way, but really where it can help us all in kind of our daily lives as well. So it's that creation component that has really been a bit of a game changer. On the whole, and this is a Gartner report, I think I pulled in August of last year, so it's a bit dated. But this sort of need to, work generative AI into our daily routines, right? As Gartner sort of reported here, it's, we're sort of now past the hype circle a little bit. And now it's sort of operationalizing to some degree within our daily lives. You're all seeing it, you're hearing it, you're on this webinar because you want to learn more about it, right? These are all really interesting things to know, but it's just important to sort of see this more from the standpoint of it's less about hype now, and it's more about again operationalizing AI into our lives, and this is a really important factor. Now, what we've seen at our work and within our work is also an impact in sort of the jobs we're doing on a regular basis. We do a lot of digital consulting, right? And a lot of digital transformation work. So that's practically speaking, it's a lot of app development, web development, that sort of thing. But these days, I would say the vast majority of the work we're doing really is around AI and really helping organizations not just experiment, but as I said, operationalize this. And anecdotally, this is just a percentage of the number of AI projects we've had come in the door over the last year. And it just goes to show you how how important this is. So that you are all here and wanting to learn about this is a really important factor because it is becoming foundational to the success of just about any organization and certainly with the employees within that organization. This is a reality, though, right? Employers expect 39% of workers' core skills to change by 2030. We are now in a world that is evolving. Everybody is now, being tasked with, okay, how do I become more efficient, more effective? How do I produce at a higher level? And how do I leverage AI to really help me do that? And the truth of the matter is that can be a bit overwhelming, right? And especially as I start thinking about, phrases like this, right? The AI won't take your job, but someone who knows AI might. I'm sure you've all heard this at this point. It's funny, I was trying to quote this to somebody, but it's so overused at this point. It's, just a phrase that people say, but it's the truth. And it's certainly one of those things as we're starting to think about where do we go next or where do we start, that is, sort of highlights the need for everyone to sort of take this all in and sort of figure out where we go next. The thing is, though, is it's everywhere, right? I was paying attention to the Google I/O conference last week, and they had a million big announcements, right? And it was one of those things where I'm listening and I'm watching and I'm learning about this, and oh my God. And then they came out with this thing, and I forgot. I don't know if I forgot to share the sound. It kind of doesn't matter. But
welcome to a non-existent car show.
Let's give you a
Let's see some
pretty
opinions.
interesting thing that they produced, which is the new VO3 model.
You look far, step on the pedal, and you are there.
I feel safe with him in an
So
SUV.
this is just a car show
seems to be
that they mimic through a single prompt. None of this is real, right? None of this is all fake. This is all generated by AI, right? It's wild. And it's one of those things as I was watching it, I was
like the right type of car.
I was like,
welcome to a non-existent car show.
get to that
Let's see some
screen here. I was like, wow. I was like, this is crazy. Like, how are we going to need to know all this? And what are we going to do with this in our organization? And how are we going to help clients figure out how to use this stuff? And then what do I do with it on my daily basis? And my brain starts going crazy and I start thinking like, oh, wow, where are we going to go next? And then I had to take a deep breath and recognize that I don't create videos. I don't need to know this. It's really neat and it's really interesting. And it's certainly something that I got to keep on top of because I'm an AI consultant, but it doesn't mean that everybody needs to. And I think that's the big sort of takeaway here is at the end of the day, you don't need to know everything about AI. You just need to know the stuff that's going to be relevant to you. Okay. And start thinking about how it can impact your daily lives and your daily routines. So let's shift gears here. Let's start talking a little bit about a framework. And this is a framework that we use with all of our clients to help them kind of figure out what use cases to begin to focus on. And we do this at an organizational level, but I think it's a really helpful way of thinking about where to begin and what are the tools that you need to start to think about with AI in your daily routines and how we can start to build those new AI skill sets on a more regular basis. So let's hop into this. So first and foremost, I mentioned this up front, we're experienced consultants. So we live at the intersection of solutions and experience. In this case, is the intersection of AI and experience. And what makes it really unique and interesting about us is we're focused on human outcomes, right? We're focused on solving problems, not on the technology. And I say this all the time, but the truth of the matter is like, I don't wake up in the morning thinking about AI. I wake up in the morning thinking about how am I going to get through my day and do the best job I possibly can. And AI can empower me to do that better, but it's not the end solution. The end solution is how do I look at my day or I help a client look at their day and really make their experiences better, right? And I think that's a key focus here. And certainly a key guiding principle for how we try to solve problems is that human element. How do I keep the human in the loop, not replace the human, but augment them and make them more impactful? So what's a good experience, right? And what are we really shooting for? Well, there's three primary elements to this that we consider. The first is good experiences are personalized. And especially when we think about, like, you guys go think about like the best shopping experiences you have or your Uber app, right? What makes us so great is it says, hey, Mike, the car will be there in however many minutes. You get to track it the whole time. You know exactly where it's going, et cetera. But that's all personalized to me. Right. And especially in a world like that, or a world where Amazon, where I'm a single button and a purchase away, and then all of the products are recommended, like good experiences are personalized. Good experiences are also proactive, right? They're solving problems before they become problems. They think ahead, right? If you think about maybe the best, say, dining experience you've had, right? When your glass of water or your wine is sort of getting low, right? The best servers come over and they fill that glass before you have to ask, right? There's no different in the digital world. Like we want experiences to think ahead for us, right? And AI is in a perfect position to help us do that. And then they're predictive. And another good word here is connected, right? Connected is probably the right phrase here, where you start to string together a whole bunch of events, and a terminology we like to use is next best action, right? They help us take that next best action without having to take too much energy off of ourselves to take that action, right? A very important factor as well. At the end of the day, though, and this is a really good article about the future of experience on the whole, but certainly customer experience, it's really anticipating and fulfilling the needs of people where the real value lies. And this is really where we begin to think about, okay, how do we make lives better? And how can each of you kind of make your lives better, right? But where do I start, right? And that's really where the trick is. So what I'm going to give you here is that model and that framework. It's a term we use a lot, and it's kind of the backbone of our business, which is journey mapping, right? We sort of look at how, if we're looking at it from a consumer context, to how a customer gets from awareness through a purchase and then retention. If I'm thinking about it from an employee's perspective, right? How are they getting through various tasks, and how are they stringing together those tasks over the course of the day? If we think about it personally, what does your day look like, right? I wake up at 5 o'clock in the morning. Days like today, I wake up a little bit earlier because we're on at 7 a.m., right? But I wake up early and I get going early and I start working early. And then my day, professionally ends around 5, but really it's probably like 7, 8, 9, depending on what I got to do with the kids later and all of that, right? So we have a long day and I have a lot of things that happen over the course of that day. And especially when I really think about the various activities I do over the course of that day, right? First thing I do in the morning is check email. And then I prep for my day, right? If I have a little bit morning gap, I might, post something to LinkedIn or write a blog post or something along those lines. Then I'm generally in meetings all the time. I'm talking to people all the time, right? We start looking at what's kind of happening in that regard. I do a lot of research. I'm a consultant, so I have to be kind of up to standards with what's happening in the world, right? We do a lot of pitching and business development, and then I do a lot of brainstorming and try to think through problems, right? And then certainly play a large role in business development. But this is the course of my day. And if any one of you start to think about where AI is going to fit into your day, this is a good place to start, because this helps us prioritize as well. You know what you don't see in here is there's no part of here where I'm making videos or I'm all of a sudden going to be making films, right? So like all of that sort of technology and some of the stuff that's happening, not that I don't need to be aware of it, but its impact on my daily routine doesn't necessarily matter as much, right? We want to be solving for these problems. But the question is like, okay, well, how can I enhance my day? Well, there's two big considerations especially around AI opportunities. And we think about these two things. It's either where am I going to remove friction or where am I going to add value, right? How do I remove the tedious tasks that I do on a regular basis? Or how do I expand the things that I do and add additional emphasis to the things that I do well, that I enjoy doing, that are going to be added value to the business that I do and the clients that I serve, right? So if I really think about it, right, email, like, man, email's a big time suck. And especially trying to draft an email, trying to put, messaging together and trying to make that work well. I mean, y'all know, if you're trying to write a good email, it's a 15, 20-minute task, right? If you're really doing it right. Prepping for my day. I have a lot of meetings. I got to really think through, what does my schedule look like? How am I going to get organized in that regard? The opposite side of that is some of these things that I enjoy doing that are additional value, right? Things like the thought leadership and the blog posts I write. Things like the pitches I go through and develop, and the decks like this one that I put together for presentations, right? These are all things where, AI can add additional value, but I don't really want to replace those activities. I enjoy doing that, number one, but number two, that's really where I bring a lot of additional value. So while we want to remove the tediousness of things like putting my emails together, prepping for meetings and that sort of stuff, we want to add value to the items that are really going to benefit the people around me and the work that I do on a regular basis. It's a really good framework to start to think about how do you begin to solve problems. And then we start to map, okay, what are the tools and technologies and AI skills that are out there that are going to help me really make my day better, right? This is my AI tech stack. These are the things that I use on a regular basis. Okay. And I'm going to go through each of these in various scenarios. Not all of them, but particularly the top line there. But I use ChatGPT all the time. Frankly, I would not have been able to prepare for this presentation if it wasn't for ChatGPT, to be perfectly frank. But that's because I use it to enhance my ability to produce content, rewrite that content, explore ideas. It's Claude, Anthropic. If you're not familiar, it's awesome. And particularly now, and I'm going to show you, it does a lot of connections with out of the box. We're a Google house, so we use Gmail, Google Calendars, et cetera, and it really helps me organize my day in that regard. Perplexity, great tool. It's a great replacement for just a regular search engine. And I'll show you a little bit about how we use this for research. And then some simple things like we're on a Zoom call right now. The transcripts that come out of this are so important to me. I'm not great at taking notes. I take a lot of notes, but when I go look back at those notes, they're usually a jumbling of ideas. It's really great to have a summarization and come out of the transcript of a Zoom meeting and then being able to use that. It's a very important factor for me. And there's all sorts of things out there like Otter and Read and et cetera. And I think there's a few on here that people can use. And then I use Miro. Miro is something that's probably more specific to me and my industry, but we use this for virtual whiteboarding and it's got a bunch of AI tools sort of baked into it. But what you're seeing here is a core collection of AI tools and technologies that are specific to me, right? Specific to the work that I do. And then what I do is I align them, right? This is where we can start to solve these problems, whether I'm using some combination of Claude and ChatGPT to create blog posts or thought leadership, or leveraging Claude to help me sort of organize my day, or using some combination of ChatGPT and Miro for some of the brainstorming activities. This gives me a sense of where are these problems I need to solve and what are the sort of key tools and technologies that I need to have at my disposal. And then we can sort of look at the skill sets that have to come along with that. The thing is, depending on what you're doing and the kind of role you play, there are all sorts of tools and technologies out there, right? You might be working at a place where Salesforce is prevalent. Salesforce has a lot of AI tools built into it. Their agent force is remarkable and it does a lot of things. And that might be a thing that you want to focus on because that's built in. If you're an engineer, Cursor is a great code assistant, and it's fantastic. Some of our engineers use it pretty regularly, right? Or if you're in a Windows suite, say you're an accountant and you're spreadsheets all day, Copilot and Excel are a great combination of things to learn, right? They're going to help you move through those spreadsheets faster. But again, what you're starting to see here are singular things that you can start to learn and can pluck off versus trying to know all of the things about AI. Moving ahead here. Let's start to actually dive into some of these skills. And I have a handful here that we'll get into and hopefully provide a fair amount of insight for everybody. What we're going to start with though is prompting, because prompting really is foundational for every sort of AI activity that you do. And frankly, what we're talking about here is learning how to speak and direct to AI, right? But prompting is essentially one of those kind of key skills that, you can go Google this or use Perplexity or ChatGPT or any one of these other tools to give you some guidance on how to prompt and what prompting skills look like. I'm going to give you a little bit of a rundown here. But if we think about how to learn to speak to AI, what we're talking about is learning to shape its output to serve your goals. I'm going to give you some really clear things that I've learned in prompting over the years, and hopefully it gives you some things to think about. So what I'm going to give you here is a little bit of a rundown that I did using ChatGPT. Prompting is pretty similar depending on the tools you're using, but how the output that you're trying to get out of each one. So if you're doing research versus if you're trying to create, like, that'll change a little bit. But I think the foundational aspects here are pretty uniform across all the platforms. But let's say, I'm going to prompt, right? I'm going to provide an initial prompt. So in prepping for this, I said, okay, how can professionals stay relevant? And I get a response from ChatGPT. It says, professionals can stay relevant by continuing to learn, embracing change, and adapting to new technologies. I mean, it's correct, but it's generic, right? That's not exactly what I was hoping for here. Right now, we're talking about AI, we're talking about skill set development and all of that. Okay, so how can I make that prompt better? Okay, so we want to get more specific, right? In this case, I'm going to say, okay, how can experienced professionals stay relevant in a world shaped by AI? I added a couple extra words. I made it a little more specific. And what do you get? You get a better output, or experienced professionals can stay relevant in an AI-driven world by learning how to use AI tools, understanding the industry's specific tech landscape, and developing complementary human skills like creativity, critical thinking, etc. A better response. Still broad though, and lacks maybe a specific perspective, right? Okay, so I'm going to add a little more context here, right? I'm going to, as an AI strategist, how should experienced professionals think about staying relevant in an AI-powered workplace? Now, all of a sudden, now I've given a personality to the AI. I've told the AI, I need you to act like me, right? Now, thankfully, one of the reasons I use ChatGPT all the time is I've been using it for the last, few years. So it knows me well now. It knows who I am. It knows a lot of context about who I am. So it will it has a little bit of extra, like that AI strategist has some extra meaning behind it, right? And it's one of the cool things, like long-term memory with some of these things can really make them a lot more powerful. But in this case, it gives me a pretty solid response. As an AI strategist, I recommend that experienced professionals reframe their expertise to align with emerging workflows, upskill in AI collaboration, prompting tool integration, and position themselves as trusted entrepreneurs or interpreters between tech and business needs, right? So you're just seeing just more depth in the response, right? And what we've done is we've sort of added these sort of key elements to really provide that, right? Much stronger role-defined insights start to emerge. When we think about how we want that response to come out, though, right? Like that's a very technical response. Let's say I want to add some personality to the response and I want it to be a bit shorter, right? So I gave the same response, but this is a key line, right? Please make the output friendly and no more than one sentence. Now, all of a sudden, we're starting to add that specific context. And then what do you get? You get a shorter response, but it's a much more direct response, right? Stay curious, lean into what makes you uniquely you, and use AI to amplify, not replace your value. That's a different response, right? That's a more human friendly response, right? Because I added that extra context at the end where I'm guiding the response. Now, all of a sudden, now the prompt becomes a much more meaningful directive to get the response that I'm looking for: detailed, clear, warm, and useful. So the way I like to have people sort of think about this is more in terms of, what are those key prompting elements every time you kind of go into this, or depending on what you're trying to do. One, you want to provide context, and generally that's being role specific, but that could mean a lot of things, right? What we're just trying to do is create the atmosphere with which the AI can function. Second is being super specific. So the way I sort of look at this, right, is like you're talking to, a kid, and you're trying to, teach that kid how to do something, right? The more specific you are, the better output you're going to have on the whole, right? And then you want to guide the response, as I said, depending on what we want that output to look like, we're going to give it that kind of structure. And these are key. And every time you begin to use these tools on a regular basis, I think prompting as a skill set is something that people learn, and I'm even still learning how to make it work. The other thing is, especially as these AI tools continue to get better, which has been super interesting, and especially the new Claude just dropped, and it's crazy how well it sort of understands context without having to be super specific. So you'll see that the need to write these super long, crazy prompts is starting to become less and less necessary. But this is, I think, a pretty good guidepost. A couple extra points here. Using examples when helpful, right? If you want a particular format, show what you're looking for. So write product descriptions like this. Now write one for X. The more you can kind of provide structure in a framework, the better the output is going to be. Positive and negative examples, I think is good. Do this, don't do that. And that's been a super huge help for me, and particularly when I'm brainstorming. And then follow up and keep providing direction. If you're not happy with the result, provide more specific direction, examples, and context. It's funny to me. I'll talk to folks who are using AI, and they'll be like, "Well, I tried a thing and I didn't get the answer." Well, just like any sort of intelligent human who you were trying to direct, they might not get it right the first time around. So you have to help them sort of provide that context. The other thing, and I didn't include it in here, is validating the responses. Now, hallucinations is a term you've probably heard, but what it means is it's basically when the AI doesn't have a clear answer and it's trying to make something up. This is generative AI. I go back to AI creating. It's core functionality or its core directive is to give you a result. It wants to please you. So it's important that, the more direction you provide and the more you sort of work with the AI, the more you're providing that specificity and really working it like clay, right? So definitely something to consider, at least on the prompting front. Okay. Second skill set here, getting organized, and especially in an unstructured world. I will say this, for me personally, I'm pretty anal when it comes to most things. I'm very organized. I like folders and structure and all of that. AI is making that a lot easier these days. I'm going to give you a quick example of this, but it's an important skill set to know, right? In a world of constant input, shifting priorities, it can help to cut through the noise, structure your day, stay focused on what matters most. And I'm going to give you a couple examples of how I use this in that regard. Using Claude. And again, the cool thing about Claude is it has essentially these baked in integrations with Gmail, Calendar, even Drive, although I don't have it connected to Drive. But like, if I'm looking at this, can you please provide me a summary of my day? What do I need to prep for? Right. Again, you see the prompt there, kind of what I'm doing. Right. And it's going to go look at my email, and it goes through quite a few things, my email, my calendar, my messages, and it's going to give me essentially a TLDR, so a summarization of the key focus areas for the day, right? Lets me know that I got 11 meetings, which is crazy, this one included. But then it starts to summarize a lot of the things that I'm going to need to know over the course of the day, obviously including this talk. But then, I have my first meeting with my business partner at 9, meetings sort of following up from that. It gives me a pretty good rundown of what I'm doing. So what I'm doing here is I didn't have to go into my email. I didn't have to go into my calendar, sort of pulled it all together in one shot. And actually connecting this to Claude was actually super simple, right? It took about 2 seconds. Now, the one thing I will say, depending on the organization you work with, depending on what their privacy and security concerns are, this might not be available to you. But they have similar tools in Outlook. They have similar tools within the Microsoft suite. But it's really important to sort of starting to leverage the AI to really help not just get yourselves organized, but really create the action items for the day. Now, in preparation for this, I'm also trying to get logistical insight, right? What do I need to know for this morning, right? Well, this is great. Give me the rundown of the Zoom meeting invite, what the format of the presentation needed to look like, et cetera, et cetera. Now, the funny thing, and Sushma can attest to this, like we had a bunch of emails that went back and forth, right? This wasn't something that was just one document that said, this is exactly how everything's going to work. There was probably 50 emails that went around, I don't know, 55 emails, but the summarization of this is super helpful, right? And this is exactly where we start thinking about how staying organized is no longer a nice to have, it's a need to have, right? And not using these tools to help in that regard, frankly, it seems like a miss.
So let me just point out um, the thing that Mike is talking about is see the comment here, the presentation, 35 to 40 minutes. Sushma suggested building it to 40 minutes just in case questions are trickling in. So let me cue this up, folks. Get ready with your questions.
There you go. There you go. Oh, as you can see, though, it's a super helpful tool. And again, these are, by the way, ChatGPT, Claude, and Perplexity, they're free. You can go use the free versions. Now, I pay for them because you get more feature set out of them. And frankly, I'm really interested in keeping all my stuff secure. So there's some extra added benefit to that. But like, these are all great tools just to use in your daily lives. And they certainly help to keep organized. All right, communication. So using AI to communicate more effectively. So I use AI pretty consistently to help me with emails. It's really saving time, but it's really strengthening my messaging as well. I overthink everything. It is a problem I have in life, and especially when I'm writing emails, my tone, all of those things. This helps me cut through all of that because I've written a bazillion emails already, and it can help to say, okay, this is the format, this is how I structure the things I want to say, so please write me something. So in preparation for today, I want to write a thank you email to Sushma and Sabrina for helping me prep for this after this call. So I thought, okay, I'd get ahead of that, and I'd sort of put that. So I'm looking for an email from Sushma about this morning. Please provide personalized response to her and Sabrina for having me host the event, and please include following insights. So I gave her some things that I'm going to be talking about, right? And it was great. Now I had to go back and forth on this a little bit. I had to get them to. It was a little too long the first time around. There's some extra details that I didn't really want, et cetera. But fundamentally, this took about 5 seconds for me to prompt it, reprompt it, etc. And Sushma and Sabrina should expect this email right after this call, or right after this webinar, right? Like, I'm getting ready for that. It helped me move through my day a lot faster. And at the end of the day, just a great extra tool to help me do the stuff that I'm doing on a regular basis. Research. So I do a ton of research, and I imagine there isn't a job on earth where you're not going to have to do some homework and you're going to have to Google some things. Here's the thing though. Google is fundamentally the search experience from Google, or back in the day, Yahoo or Bing, is not great, or it hasn't been great, because the idea there is like, I'm going to go put a bunch of keywords in. I'm going to go get a response. I'm going to go through 10 pages, maybe get to page 2 of those results. Although the running joke is, if you want to hide a dead body, put it on page 2 of Google results, right? You're not going to get there. So what we need better technology to do that. Now, the AI results in Google these days are a lot better, and they give you a lot to work with. But I'm going to give you a tool here to think about. So again, the big takeaway here is really thinking through, how do I get to insights faster, right? Perplexity is a really good tool for this. Now, I use ChatGPT and the deep research function in ChatGPT probably more than Perplexity, just because I'm lazy and I like everything in ChatGPT. But at the end of the day, Perplexity is a very good tool as well, and I use this for bigger projects that I'm working on. But like, for instance, again, you'll see the prompting skill set here as well. I'm putting a presentation together about the future skill set development in AI world, particularly for people 45 plus. Can you please provide seven key skills everyone needs to learn? And what Perplexity will do is it'll start to go through what's called reasoning, and it'll start to really look at various things that are out on the internet and all of this stuff. And it's looking at 50 different links out there and different types of resources and information. It's pulling that all back for you, right? Think about all the work you would have to do to go find all of this information. It probably would take you hours to do this, between Google search and, looking at old documents and blah, 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 and this and that and everything else, right? And this can kind of keep it all in one spot. And the results you get is pretty extensive. Now, I didn't love everything it had to say, but there was definitely a handful of things that I thought were pretty interesting. What's also interesting is that it gives you all of the sources, which is why Perplexity is a very good thing. As I said before, a lot of generative AI will make stuff up. This is a very good tool for diving in deep to any particular topic, having those sources available to you, and then if you want to dive in deeper on any one of them, going ahead and doing that. It keeps everything in kind of one spot. If you're doing any sort of professional research, whether that's, for us, it's in the consulting work we're doing and trying to stay on top of thought leadership. But truth be told, I mean, anything you're trying to do, whether that's in, I'm an accountant and I'm trying to understand better tax codes for whatever, based on your jurisdiction, or I work in a school district and I'm trying to do, XYZ and understanding sort of, rules and guidelines, or I'm a wealth manager and I'm trying to understand, where, I could be potentially, putting the dollars for my clients, right? A lot of things to be thinking about. Great tool for that purpose. All right, probably the number one thing I use it for is brainstorming. So here's the thing. I love working at a creative agency. One of the things that is sort of gets me up in the morning is working with creative people. The challenge is those creative people are in meetings a lot of the time, and these days we're sort of partially remote. We have a little bit of a hybrid environment. People come in here and there, but all the more reason why it is, when I'm trying to work out an idea, having a thought partner in that regard is a really big deal. So brainstorming in general is a pretty powerful thing. Now, I use this for everything from blog writing to presentations like this to solving client problems, right? But I think it's an important thing to note. And I'm going to give you a couple things to think about here, particularly on the creative side. Again, we're going to stick with ChatGPT on this one. But this is something I did recently. There was an article I read on Business Insider about the big consulting firms using essentially chatbots within their organization, right? And I wanted to write something on LinkedIn, and I had a general idea about what I wanted to write. But I really wanted to challenge the thinking, and I wanted to say, okay, is my head in the right spot? Am I really thinking about this the right way, right? And all of a sudden, I turned AI into a thought partner, which is super interesting, right? And as we kind of go through this, it gives me a better sense of kind of what I can write, how I can write it, all of this stuff, which is interesting. But what I'm asking it to do is rethink, what I'm at and what my responses are. And in this case too, I want it, even what I'm sort of planning on producing for LinkedIn, I want it to sound a bit more like me. Just the fact that I'm even asking that is kind of crazy because ChatGPT has that much history on me now that it knows what I sound like. So it can reformat what I'm saying and how I'm saying it. But this was even an interesting, right? So I wrote a thing and I said, do you agree with the points above? Please be critical of my thoughts. And what it gave me was the things that it agreed with and the things it didn't agree with, and then some factors there for me to consider. Now, this is just me writing a LinkedIn blog post, right? But like I do this all the time when I'm trying to, if it's strategically, I'm trying to develop a new model, or I'm trying to think about where my business is going, or where I'm trying to think about what I'm trying to do with a client, right? Very good thought partner, right? A very good, like, let me think about this. Let me follow up. Let me challenge the ideas. Let's go back and forth on this a little bit. And a very good tool for that. Okay. But this is where things get really interesting when we start to connect the dots. So this might get a little more complex, but I definitely think this is an important thing for people to start to recognize is when we start to connect the dots between data and AI tools to make life a little more interesting. And again, everything I'm showing you here, I'm a little technical, but I'm not like an engineer, right? So I'm not really building this stuff on a regular basis, but this should give you a pretty good sense of what we do. But it's really the power of sort of connecting the dots between data, content, and context to streamline processes, right? So what I'm going to talk to you about is a concept called GPTs. GPTs are super helpful. They're basically like stored instructions and data sets that can help you basically go through more complex tasks, right? So the one I'm going to show you is basically uses our sales funnel and communicating with folks around our sales funnel. And why this is complex is there's a handful of things that we produce depending on where somebody is at in our funnel, right? So the top of the funnel, and I'm trying to, do some outreach around just establishing prospect interest. I'm going to send a different kind of message than if we're in the middle or bottom of that funnel and how we're kind of communicating. We need the context. We also need the resources, right? I don't just email people, hey, you should work with us. I need to give them a reason why to work with us. And then I need to give them some context to that as well. Generally, that's in the term of things like case studies, thought leadership, et cetera, that kind of comes along with that. So what I'm going to show you is what GPTs look like. So I built a GPT called the O3 email builder, but you can go find GPTs in ChatGPT. They're generally on the upper left-hand corner where you see Explore GPTs on the left. And they're actually pretty easy to build. I mean, I had to experiment a little bit, but this should give you a pretty good sense of how these things work, right? So when you get in, I provide the instructions. The instructions are just a prompt. It's just a prompt. This is what I need you to do, and this is how I need you to do it. I give it a description, but the big thing that where we're sort of connecting the dots is I give it some additional knowledge, some things that I want it to work off of. And this is why a GPT, as opposed to just using a regular prompt, is super useful. So I'll give you a sense of this. What I did was I gave it two documents. I gave it a document that has, and this is just a Google Doc, that sort of outlines the phase of where we're at, general structure of an email that I'll send kind of regularly, and then some links and some things that I want people to know, and where I want them to be as far as the thought leadership that I want to share, depending on where they're at in that process, right? So move on to the next one. Then I provided just some general insight about our services, some links to some case studies that would be relevant depending on the industry, right? And in all of these cases, what I'm doing is I'm just giving it knowledge, right? I'm giving it specific knowledge about O3. If I just ask ChatGPT about this, it'll probably give me a decent idea, but I want to give it something really specific, particularly when I'm writing these certain messages. So as you can see, this is a little more complex than me just asking it to produce an email. This is, I need an email to get structured with some assets to come along with it. And I need that to be kind of an easy process. But here's where it gets super cool. So when I go back into, let me pause this real quick. When I go back into the GPT, right? Now I've uploaded these two documents, so it has that as reference. But what I'm doing here then is I'm saying, all right, I have a follow-up email that I need to send. I'm telling the GPT, okay, the phase is intro. This is the person, Katie Pearson, is a made-up person, marketing director at some fintech company. I recently met them at an event. She's interested in discussing how to, leverage AI for her team. And she also liked this one project that we happen to work on, right? I didn't have to write a whole bunch there. That's actually information I could have probably gotten from an input form from our website. That's something that I could have gotten from a Zoom summary, right? That could kind of come along with that. Something where I'm just copying and pasting that into the prompt there. And then what it's going to do is it's going to write me an email, right? And it's going to write that message for me and structure that appropriately, right? There you go. And I give it some format and some structure, which is great. It keeps me from having to write all that, gives me the right links depending on what I'm trying to do. And then it just makes my life easier copying and pasting that right into an email, right? Now, there are tools out there like HubSpot and Salesforce that do some of this that are baked in what they're doing. But if all you're trying to do is create a series of tools to sort of connect the dots on that, it's a really good thing to use. Another good example, and we did this in preparation for this, Sabrina actually had a marketing brief builder, which was awesome. And like it helped us basically put this whole talk together in the agenda in about, I don't know, 10 minutes, right? Something that would have taken me a lot longer. But it was great because it guides you through the process and it really connects the dots between some more advanced functionality, data sets, and really using AI to help you sort of figure that out. And it's really, this is just an example, but it's really starting to figure out how to use one piece of AI in connection with another and being creative about how we're piecing these things together. All right, last bit. And I think this is probably the biggest thing that anybody, as we start thinking about skill set and skill set development in an AI world, continuous learning. We're no longer in a world where somebody's going to do the same job every day for 20 years. It's just not going to happen. Whole jobs are going to be evolving on a regular basis. So as I keep telling my kids, you need to love to learn because this is the primary shift. Now, this can feel overwhelming at times. I know I'm totally overwhelmed with having to keep up with the AI news on a regular basis and having to continually rethink what I'm doing and all of that. But it doesn't have to be. And there's a lot of ways in which we can think about, honestly, leveraging AI to help us continuously learn. I'm going to give you one quick thing that I do. I do a lot of things, but I think this is a pretty easy one. I use a thing in ChatGPT called Tasks. What Task does is it's basically a little agent that they have set up where you can have it do a task every day, have it check a thing every day, check a website every day, or whatever the case is. In this case, I just need the AI news to come to me. Like I just don't want to have to go out there and go look at certain things. So I give it some context, right? And I've said, hey, can you please give me a briefing on AI news each morning? And it said, okay, what time? And I said 5 a.m. when I get up in the morning so I can read it with my coffee, right? And then I gave it a lot more structure after this. But essentially then what I get is, a series of these. Now I've given it a bunch of tasks, but every morning, 5 a.m., or I guess in this case, 5:01, I get my tasks into my email and it gives me, the links I'm looking for. And then, I can link and I can get into the message and then I get a pretty good rundown of kind of what's happening on any regular basis. So I'm looking for things like client news. I'm looking for things like specific insights that I want to get, right? Just a really good way of sort of staying on top of the news. And it makes continuous learning a lot easier. Now, there's a whole lot of other things baked into this, but to me, it's the number one skill set when we think about the development of AI skills that everyone has to sort of embrace. It's just how do we keep on top of this stuff and how do I keep learning? I will say this last thing. Now I got this from a friend, Mike Urban, who I didn't even realize I was doing this, but sort of made a really good point. This doesn't have to be about work. One of the biggest things I think for sort of leveraging AI is starting to figure out how to leverage AI in your daily life. Using it for personal matters, I think, will help to open up your mind as far as what you can do with this on a regular basis. Mike, as I was just saying, actually built something for surf fishing, right? And GPT for surf fishing on a personal level, which is fantastic. It's a great little tool if you're interested in fishing. I use it for trip planning. I don't use, do a lot of traveling with the family. I don't use travel agents because I'm a little bit of a control freak and I really enjoy certain things about my trips and it's something I enjoy doing. But actually planning a trip can be a real bear and a real time suck, but not anymore. And I'm going to tell you, I use ChatGPT for all of my trip planning. This past spring, we went to Italy. So I had it really help me plan my Italian trip itinerary, which I get to in a minute. But as you can see, even on the left, these are all the things I use this for, right? So for instance, my son plays soccer, got some turf in his eye, and I had no idea what to do with it. What a great thing to ask to sort of get some insight about whether or not that's going to be a problem. Now, I will say verify, right? I ask for links, I go to websites, I make sure that's there. I'm not trusting Dr. ChatGPT here, but it definitely gives you a whole lot to work with. And I use it sort of on a regular basis on the whole. But going back to my trip, wow, it nailed it. And anyone in my family can attest that, like, I didn't have to do a bunch of additional prompting here. I didn't have to dig in too deep. Gave me a whole bunch of really great suggestions. We were in turn. It was our first stop, and we had a great time. You know, as you can see, I mean, it was fundamentally, it was a wonderful trip. And this is the part about AI making your life better, right? This is between the experiences we had, managing the weather, and even the food and specific things. My wife doesn't eat gluten, right? So we had to make sure we had gluten-free options, right? It helped me sort of work all that out in an instant, right? AI making my life better, making my routines a lot easier. So last thing. So I think that one of the things to think about on the whole, and I'll just kind of leave this up and then I'll take questions, is really thinking about AI as a virtual assistant, right? Thinking about it as somebody that can help you solve problems. A very important factor when we think about, how to sort of think about AI in your head. It is not there to replace you. It is there to help you do your job better, right? And I think it's the most practical way of thinking about it. This is a fantastic article, and I'll share out this deck after this so everybody has it. But by a guy named Ethan Mollick, who's a terrific AI leader. He's a professor out of Penn here in Philadelphia, and he's done a ton of really great work on this. But this is such an important sort of note where you really start thinking about AIs more as a support mechanism for the things we do on a day-to-day basis. It can really help you think about those use cases that are going to impact your life the best. So. All right, that's all I got. Well, thank you very much for having me, and yeah, I guess we'll open it up to any questions.
Great, Gatsby. This has been great, Gatsby. Okay, this has been a phenomenal session where you've provoked us to think about very practically applying AI in our lives, and I think that's the sum and substance of this. That there was a time when the internet came, we went through the same kind of thing. And today, the internet is part of, I mean, we can't live without it. It's fabric of
Right.
our lives.
Yep.
AI is the next fabric of our lives. And the sooner that you embrace that, the better it is for all of us. I've got some really good questions. I'm going to start with Viral Oza, who's talking about data privacy.
Yep.
He says, Claude goes into, and not just Claude, every one of these AI engines goes through a lot of personal information.
Mm-hmm.
Mike, any do's and don'ts, anything that you would recommend people safeguard themselves to ensure that their data is kept private?
A number one question we get all the time, and I think it's a very important one. Okay, so I'm going to give you, I guess, the corporate answer to this, and then I'll give you my philosophy behind it as well. So the tools themselves have very clear privacy policies, and then functionality that you have to be very aware of. One, I always get the pro versions of these things because I want to make sure that I'm getting the best of whatever security functionality that they provide. But additionally, you used to just sort of click the yes, I agree to the terms of use, right? I read those, and I read them very in depth. So I want to understand what they're doing. And for the most part, your ChatGPTs, your Claudes, your OpenAIs, I mean, their privacy policies are pretty clear. The other thing is I don't want it to use my information to train the models. And there is some very clear sort of functionality in each of them that you have to, log into and opt into to make sure that that's the case. So on the whole, if you sort of look at and trust the privacy policies behind these things, and if you're super clear about what they're doing with your information and understand what they're at, there's a lot of comfort level there. I will say, though, the other side of this is it is so important to be extremely careful with this. I do not share client information. You saw the email integrations there. I looked that over in 5,000 different ways. And then looking at it in terms of, how it's going to help me organize my day and all of that. There's certainly a handful of things in there that I had to be very careful with also. But on the whole, as far as the organizational change is concerned, our trust for these things is definitely a important thing to consider. Philosophically, I hand off a little of our information in order to provide a little more of that personalization that I can get on a daily basis, makes me more efficient and effective. And I think that trade-off is something that folks are going to have to understand at a deeper level on a more regular basis, right? And so between knowing what those policies look like, between knowing what the gains can look like, I think it's a personal decision that individuals need to make.
So please be very, educate yourself, ask people, do not click without reading the fine print.
Exactly. Yep.
Sudha has a very important follow-on questions. How are enterprises choosing to use AI versus human? And what kind of roles will continue to need human talent? And she acknowledges that knowing that AI could be more empathetic and maybe more emotionally intelligent. So, what are you learning on this, Gadsby?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. So one, again, I go back to what we said before. Like, we don't go into organizations with the directive of like cutting jobs. Like, that's just not a thing that we do. So we're not looking to replace individuals. We're looking to enhance the individuals that are there. So we think about this more on the tasks that people are doing on a daily basis. I can tell you a number one thing: data entry. Data entry is not a fun thing that anybody does. It is hard to do. It is tedious. It isn't particularly valuable for certain organizations. And frankly, there's folks who could be doing bigger and better things in their lives. So things like that, things where, we're talking about those tedious tasks on a regular basis. We're doing some work, in and around industrial services, right? Where there's a lot of copying and pasting of information from one space to another. Those are the sort of things that we're trying to replace in the whole. So what you find is, if you're going to pull that out, then you have to emphasize what's the value of the role that the individual is playing, and then how do we emphasize them more? So as far as where humans still play a role, I think they still play a role in all of these instances, right? And regardless of your job, what the goal is to sort of say, okay, I go back to that journey map, right? Like, what parts of your day or what parts of the job role are going to continue to produce value for the organization, and what parts are maybe just tedious and need to be rethunk. I think things like, I think the idea that, engineers aren't going to be necessary anymore and we're just going to write code with AI is not true. And it's just not something that they're seeing. Now, having engineers be more efficient by using tools like Cursor and moving through code faster and actually needing to be computer scientists, yeah, that's real. Depth of knowledge is real. I mean, you're going to have to be very good at the things that you need to be very good at in order to continually progress. Yeah, that's real. But the role that the individual is going to be playing is more to be that architect, that thought leader around the topic versus, hey, we're just going to automate this whole process. Because the other thing is we're big fans of human in the loop, as you can tell. System of checks and balances has to be in place across the board. And it's definitely one of those things to really consider as you're sort of using these things.
All right, we are coming up at the top of the hour. So two very quick questions.
Sure.
One from Thirumal. And Thirumal, your question might require a longer answer. He wants to know, what are the steps to take to get into AI and Gen AI? He's a newbie. I recommend we can give you a much longer answer, but a short, crisp one would be good. And Abhijit wants to know, what are some of the publications, newsletters, things that you should subscribe to And Sabrina has suggested Neuron newsletter. But is
Great.
there any other source that one should get plugged into to keep up with what's happening?
All right, let's answer the first question first. So I'm sorry, the first one was Sushma. Can you
What does somebody who's a newbie to
newbie, right?
AI need to do to get into AI and Gen AI?
So the first thing I tell everybody is you need to use this on a regular basis. Like you just need to go into the tools that are there. ChatGPT is a great place to start. If you don't like OpenAI for whatever reason, Claude is another great place to go. Just starting to use it on a regular basis. As you saw what I do with it for personal reasons, like I use it probably more personally than I do professionally. And that's saying a lot because I use it a ton professionally. But like when I have questions, I need answers. When I have just daily routines that I'm trying to sort out, just getting in there and using the free tools is just a great place to start. So I tell everybody just, pick your tool of choice, just get in and get moving on it. And then go think about the things that like personally that you're trying to do on a daily basis that can be solved there. So I think that's like the number one thing. And then you will learn by using it. And then you can start to figure out, oh, wow, it'd be great if I use this at work for these reasons. Like, and again, that's just a great place to start. As far as insights are concerned. So the beautiful thing about AI is I pull information from everywhere. Now I have listeners for all sorts of information. So literally, I got the internet coming to my inbox right now. That task feature I showed is a really good tool to really helping me sort of organize the thinking and pulling that in. Perplexity's got something as well. I don't use it, but apparently it's a pretty good task tool also. And then I read certain newsletters like TLDR, The Information. The one Sabrina brought up was a good one. A handful of other things that are kind of out there, but really the biggest thing is I'm on LinkedIn. And I follow a lot of really great thought leaders on LinkedIn. The Ethan Mollick is a great place to start. Mollick. Go look him up, and he's a great thought leader to follow. And then honestly, go into the comments on some of his posts, and you will find also another probably 20 really great thought leaders there as well. We're talking about AI from all different points of view.
Fantastic. We're at the top of the hour. Thank you very much, Mike, and thank you very much, everyone. Two quick pieces of information for everyone who's part of Second Careers. We will be launching very soon a way in which you could subscribe to a variety of AI tools at a at a reasonably lower cost than what might be available to you for you to try. So stay tuned on that. And I would encourage all of us to think about AI as a true thought partner. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for having me. Appreciate it.